In sports today, women athletes are competing and experiencing the thrill of victory just like men. Although our modern acceptance of women in sports is a relatively recent development, some women who enjoy the challenge have competed in sports down through the ages, often in defiance of social conventions. A new exhibition at the Schlesinger Library of Radcliffe College chronicles the history of women in sports. I'm pleased to welcome the co-curator, Sally Fox. Ms. Fox, why don't we start out by talking about how you got interested in this topic of women in sports down through history?
Well, this is part of a series that I'm doing now. I'm a picture researcher, and I decided after many years of documenting textbooks with pictures and finding illustrations, I decided that I would use my experience to document what's not been documented, which is the lives of ordinary women in the past. And very often it's the only way to document women's history is through the visual image. And this is the fourth book that I've done. The other two were on medieval women and documenting occupations and Victorian women.
This book is called The Sporting Woman.
That's right.
Where did you come up with the title for that?
Well, you need a good spirit. And the sporting women all through history have had that spirit because they clearly did it whether it was acceptable or not acceptable, and they did it in spite of a lot of restrictions, both social and as well as restrictions having to do with clothing.
It's interesting to see just how far back in history the images of women athletes go. You've got a picture, for example, of an ancient Egyptian woman swimming. That's from 1300 BC or something like that?
That's right, that's right. And the Nile was part of Egyptian life, and so this was clearly, I have to say that this is not professional athletes. These are all sports that were done by ordinary women, and it was part of their daily lives. And I think that's important to remember.
But in terms of athletic competition, we often think of sports beginning with the ancient Greeks. Women were not allowed to take part in the Olympic Games,
That's
but
right.
did Greek
not
women?
Not even as spectators.
Right.
But in off years, they had a running meet called the Hera in the same Olympic Stadium in off years, but it was interesting that they were only allowed to run 5/6 the distance.
And there's an image that we have of a statue of
yes,
a
that's
woman
called
running.
the Spartan Girl. And there are very few images, actually, of Greek athletic women. This is one of the few.
One of the more remarkable images in the book is of a group of Roman women. It's a mosaic, I think.
That's right. That's
engaged in various activities, including one woman with dumbbells.
That's right, that's right. And actually, a lot of people now refer to it as the bikini girls because of the way they're dressed. But this is clearly, there are many, many sports that women did that were either sometimes for entertainment, which I suspect the Roman mosaic was, or just for themselves.
In the Middle Ages, you have images. Of course, you don't think of women particularly taking part in sports in the Middle Ages, but there's pictures of a woman and some men engaged in a merry snowball fight.
That's right, that's right. And also you see that it's a kind of competition, and it's clearly for fun. What women in the Middle Ages also hawked. This was hawking and riding was hunting were part of the social structure that was acceptable for women in the upper classes in that time.
And there is a very strange picture of hunting with a bow and arrow, hunting a stag on skis.
Right, there it is.
Some of the sports you never knew. When you watch the Olympics, sometimes there are little-known sports that seem very strange to American eyes. I think hunting stags on skis with bows and arrows would probably be one of the odder ones.
Right. Well, the thing is, once you begin looking, you begin finding all kinds of sports that are quite special, and you don't realize that in fact they did it. It was part of their daily life.
Now, I understand that Mary, Queen of Scots, Mary Stuart, was a Scot and an avid golfer. Is that just myth?
There are reports that in fact she did play golf, and golf is a very old sport for both men and women. And actually this is an interesting one because this is part of a series of cards that show women with male college insignia and banners. And
that's not Mary Stuart golfing.
No, that's not Mary Stuart. Right. But what was interesting was that at that time, at the turn of the century, and even late 19th century, in the women's colleges, if they wanted to compete, they would take on the names of various male teams of the male colleges as if that gave them permission to compete. So this was from the University of Pennsylvania.
What were the first sports that women started competing in as teens when women's colleges were founded? We've got pictures, for example, of badminton. Was that one of the early things that women went?
Well, badminton was really quite old, and also it here's a Japanese, it's still traditional on New Year's Day for Japanese women to play a version called Battledores and Shuttlecock, and here's women just after the French Revolution playing badminton, wearing dress that is less constraining. The dress became much more constraining afterwards when Napoleon wanted to increase the trade, rival England, and so he made women wear much more constraining clothing.
And it's intriguing that all through the 19th century and the Victorian era, you see women engaging in sports in the most impractical looking outfits.
That's right.
Climbing mountains in high heels. And all.
That's right. Here she is with a veil and high heels and so forth. And it's just incredible what they did. They really didn't want to defy the Victorian morality by changing their dress that much. But then they went and did it anyway. But other women did change their clothing in order to accommodate the sports, and so that then began to change the whole definition of femininity also by loosening up the clothing. Very interesting how important that was in redefining what was feminine.
What we haven't seen is women involved in sports with any kind of contact involved, getting out on the playing field and
well, yes,
elbowing
that
each
was
other.
quite deliberate, actually, by the physical educators from the women's colleges. They did not want to compete in the same way that men did, and they were emphasizing the physical development. Though field hockey was probably the most popular sport in women's colleges, and that's a very, very vigorous sport.
Field hockey and soccer, too.
That's right, that's right. But somehow that was acceptable at the time. And this is a contest from 1923. So women did compete, and they competed for the same reasons that men did, only it wasn't as socially acceptable.
Well, it's great to know how socially acceptable it's become today, and nice to have the historical picture brought home for us. Thanks for joining me.
It was a pleasure.
Sally Fox has compiled an appointment book illustrated with images of women athletes through history called The Sporting Woman, A Book of Days. She's also co-curator of the Sporting Women Insights from Her Past, an exhibition at the Schlesinger Library at Radcliffe College through March 30th. I'll be right back.